to the Hugs Not Drugs podcast, and thank you, Harry, for that rendition of Sketchbook with your band. You always knock it out of the park. We are here with episode 49, and that's entitled How It Works, Why the 12 Steps Still Matter. The characters are four of us. I'm Hugs Not Drugs. I'm your intro and outro person, and I offer some spiritual wisdom, hope, and insight. And John G., who is my co-host, and he is going to be the narrator and instructor, educator par excellence. And John Barleycorn, same voice as me, he's going to offer experience, strength, and hope from long-term recovery. And then there's Dr. Uggs, the mischief maker, the chaos agent, the comic relief. That's me in a nutshell. You hit the trilogy right there. I'm going to do the commercial now. Enough is enough. This podcast, the Hugs Not Drugs podcast, is sponsored by John Forlenza-Bailey, a real prince of a guy. He wrote 2 books. The first book he wrote was the Road to Wellness Workbook, and he used that in his private practice for years with some very good results. So he's decided to put it mainstream, and hopefully you'll buy the book if you're a mentor for somebody who has a substance abuse problem, or you have a substance abuse problem and you find a mentor. Either way, use the workbook. The workbook is designed to provide education, emotional support, and inspiration to persons suffering from addiction. It offers step-by-step lessons to people striving to turn their lives around regarding abstinence, relapse prevention, family dynamics, and self-assessment, to continue to discover self day by day. Recovery is up to you. Mentors help, journals help, but you must exchange and surrender destructive behaviors for constructive ways of handling the day-to-day stressors or triggers of life. No one deserves to continue to suffer from active addiction. Get better, do the work. And the second book he wrote was last year, published. It's called The Transformation of Dr. Uggs, and that is an allegory. The Transformation of Dr. Uggs is an original fairy tale that explains the progression of the disease of chemical dependency. It's not intended to be a story about blaming others for the acquisition of an illness. This fairy tale is intended to explain, not to blame. It is a story of discovery, insight, acceptance, and finally the right choices to live drug-free if one is chemically dependent. That's it for the commercials. Back to you, John G. Go for it, buddy.
Welcome to the Hugs Not Drugs podcast, where recovery, wisdom, laughter, and spirituality come together because together we heal. Today's topic is one of the most important chapters ever written in recovery literature, Chapter 5 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, entitled How It Works. Whether you're recovering from alcohol, drugs, gambling, food addiction, codependency, or simply trying to live a healthier life, the principles found in the 12 steps have helped millions of people around the world. Joining me today is our seasoned recovery advocate, John Barleycorn, and unfortunately also joining us, Dr. Uggs.
John G., what the hell is this about, unfortunately? I had a whole agenda planned today. That's exactly what
you're
worries.
You're a soldier of fortune, but you're certainly not. Anyway, that's another story.
But
and
he said he had a whole agenda planned today, and I said, Barleycorn here. That's exactly what worries us. My agenda was simple: blame everybody, avoid responsibility, complain loudly.
Which is exactly why we're discussing the 12 steps, Dr. Uggs. And so about Chapter 5, it was written in 1939 by the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. The chapter contains some of the most quoted lines in recovery history. Quote, "Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path," end quote. And later, "Half measures availed as nothing." The chapter introduces the 12 steps and explains the spiritual principles behind them.
You know, when I first came into recovery, I thought the steps were punishment. I eventually learned that they were freedom. Nobody was trying to control me. They were showing me how to stop being controlled by my addiction. I prefer my own recovery plan.
Which was?
No meetings, no sponsor, no inventory, no accountability, and lots of excuses.
Oh, geez. What do you think, Barleycorn?
Well, how did that work for you, Dr. Ruggs? Terribly, but it sure was fun while it lasted.
Oh, yeah, I know you, Dr. Rose. You were one of those guys that you came in and you tried to work the promises and hope the steps come true.
I just want to know the history of the 12 steps, but how in the hell am I going to get you guys drinking and drugging if you keep on practicing these principles in all your affairs?
That's exactly right. So the 12 steps emerged from the experience of the early members of Alcoholics Anonymous. The movement began with two men, Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob Smith. Bill had achieved sobriety through spiritual awakening and service to others. When Bill met Dr. Bob in Akron, Ohio in 1935, the foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous was born. The 12 steps were eventually written by Bill Wilson and published in the Big Book in 1939.
Hey, what's remarkable about these, they weren't created in a university laboratory. They came from suffering people, helping suffering people, real experience, real mistakes, real recovery. I prefer suffering people teaching other suffering people how to suffer more.
Yeah, we know, Dr. Ruggs.
Hey, explain the 12 steps to us, will you, John G? You're the narrator, instructor, educator.
Well, we could go on for weeks about this, but we'll try to give the condensed version here, And so step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable.
Yeah, that just equates to me to be honesty. The addiction beat me. The moment I admitted that, recovery became possible. My last drunk, I was naked in a police station in New Jersey. I'm not from New Jersey, okay? So I went through DTs, went to a criminally insane place, got tied, four-pointed, got beat up, and then had a spiritual awakening after that. Maybe I do have a problem with alcohol and drugs. That was a spiritual awakening. I was never powerless. I simply was making poor decisions repeatedly.
Well, John Barleycorn just showed some honesty here, which is the spiritual principle of step one, unlike the path that you're taking, Dr. Ruggs. So why don't we move on to step two? Yeah, okay.
Tell us about step two.
All right. Yeah, I know. You were never powerless. Yeah, you were simply making poor decisions. And so let's get to step two. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And this is the spiritual principle of hope. And you don't have to solve everything alone.
No, you don't. And I was just thinking about Dr. Uggs and the first step in his denial. It's the major symptom of why people can't get this. And then coming to believe in a power greater than ourselves. The program works if you believe in a higher power. Hey, the program will work if you don't believe in a higher power. But the program will not work, Dr. Uggs, if you think you are the higher power.
Yeah, that's right. Step one, we came. Step two, we came to. And then step three, we came to believe.
Well, tell us about step three. The hell with this.
Yeah, so step three, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. What do you think, Barleycorn?
This, to me, this is willingness and trust. Recovery taught me I didn't have all the answers. And thank God there were people that knew what the hell they were talking about when I got here. And I trusted them. I knew I didn't have the answers, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's it, and we talk about that leap of faith that we make. and that's, faith having complete confidence and belief and trust. And, if it were, sometimes people say, did I turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him in the third step? And the answer is no. We made a decision to, which means that now we're demonstrating the willingness to go on with the next 9 steps, because if we truly turned our lives over to the care of God in the third step, which we actually do that in the 12th step, then we would just have a 3-step program. So it's basically a declaration of willingness at that point, based on that leap of faith, that, you know what, there's something going on here and I need to explore the next 9 steps. So how about we move on to step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory. What do you think, Dr. Ruggs?
Well, I'd rather make a dentist appointment, okay? This sounds very painful, and I don't want to look at my resentments, my fears, and how it affected me self-esteem-wise, security and sex relations-wise. And then they ask me that damn question, what part did you play in it? Absolutely nothing.
Well, if we didn't have problems in the area of sex and relations, we wouldn't be human. But yeah, so if we're unwilling to look at our resentments and go through this process, and this seems to be really the roadblock for most alcoholics to not go on in their recovery. And for us, resentment is grave. It's caused more of us to drink than anything else. And for me, to drink is to die. And I hate to say this, but I've had 3 people that have been close to me. Actually 3 guys that I sponsored within the past 6 years that have ended up taking their own lives. And I would attribute it more to anything else, their unwillingness to adequately do that 4th step. They just couldn't get over their resentments.
I've seen long-term recovery, John, and people die beautiful deaths. But I've also seen what you have said, people that don't get the program, and we get to see how horrible their deaths become because they could not accept and they were still in denial.
Yes.
Okay, with that, on that happy note, step 5.
Well, now that we've learned some good chunks about ourselves and the reality of the hopelessness of this disease, we could move on to step 5. And this is where we start to get some balance, I believe. And for me, this was a major part of my recovery, because, we take that inventory, and since we're, egomaniacs with inferiority complexes, we write a lot of bad stuff about ourselves, and we feel like we're unworthy. But in step 5, we admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs.
Yeah.
And, that's where the integrity comes in. We had courage in the 4th step, but now we have the integrity as a result of sharing that with ourselves, God, and the other human being. And when I personally went through this process in step 5, the guy that I worked with, he pointed out to me, and we used as a template, the 7 deadly sins, and he said pride leading the procession, because that gives us permission to commit the next 6. And then we looked at greed and lust and anger and gluttony and envy and sloth. And what he told me was the reason that we had acted out in these ways, and 7 universal, the 7 deadly sins being pretty universal for all human beings, is that they were fear-based. And he expressed that to me when we got to anger, pride being a defect of character. But, he said, there's actually God-given and righteous desires put in us for these things. And, the problem with pride is that we want to step on other people's toes to get what we want. When in fact, pride is really that false pride and arrogance and selfishness is really the opposite of trying to find true self-esteem and true humility and true connection. So, So in this process, it was explained to me that I was afraid I wasn't going to get what I wanted, whether it was pride, whether it was greed, and it was a righteous desire to have money and security to take care of my responsibilities. Lust is an aberration of the natural God-given desire for sex. And when I'm hurting other people or hurting myself or my relationship with my higher power, then it becomes a sin. But in fact, it was righteous and God-given and one of the greatest gifts that we could have. When we got to anger, it was expressed to me, John, what are you afraid of? I was like, whoa, what are you talking about? He says, well, you're angry because you're not getting something, or you're afraid you're not going to get something. And I pondered on that for a second. And I said, yeah. And then we came out with these acronyms, fear, FEAR, face everything and recover. Or in the case of what it was like before, it was F everything or forget everything and run. And now I had the option to look at it, that it was false evidence appearing real, and I could face everything and recover. And then it was explained to me that it was the reason I was acting out of these fears was because I hadn't really completely embraced that third step, that taking that leap of faith and having the true belief and the belief that God would provide, and that God had actually put, and I use, God and higher power and creator, I use all that interchangeably, so whatever your definition of that higher power is. But, it was explained to me that I was either unwilling to accept or ignorant of the fact that my higher power had put all of these desires in my heart, which led to these 7 deadly sins. But he had put those desires in my heart for a good and righteous reason, and that ultimately the desires of my heart would be fulfilled as my Creator intended in my Creator's time, not in my time. And that was a big revelation. And then I was asked, has God not provided for you everything that you needed up to this point? Not everything you wanted, but everything you needed. And I said, yes. So then I was able to look at these 7 deadly sins with more clarity, more connection to my other fellow alcoholics and the human race in general, and came to the conclusion, if I'm just do the work, then the desires of my heart will be taken care of in God's time. And I know that's true. And I know when I take shortcuts, I get burned. And you know what? I've taken a few of them lately, and I've gotten burned. So this is about progress, not perfection.
Yeah,
so, what do you think, Barley Corn? That's a bit to digest there.
Well, you're right on target. That these mentors that we have are incredible people, and they know what they're talking about because they can identify with our sharing of our secrets, and our secrets lose power when exposed to honesty. And we've done an episode. Last week was on the 7 deadly sins and the 7 cardinal virtues. So anybody that wants to review that, it's well worth reviewing. We give out a lot of information here, so there's no. This is really this step 5, admitted to ourselves another human being and the exact nature of our wrongs, opens a door to who we are, and knowing thyself is really a great purpose in life. So how about step 6 and 7 here?
Yeah, so in step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And, that's about, it's about willingness, and it's about willingness to look at the truth of these defects of character. And when I came to the realization that in fact God was going to provide everything I needed, then it was a little bit easier for me to have that willingness. These steps are in order for a reason. So now I was truly ready to let go of that. And that's about the willingness, the more or less, to promptly act and to be, to accept what we need to let go of with choice. And it's like Sandy Beach once said, Spiritual growth is not about the attainment of anything, but it's about the willingness to let go of everything.
There it is. Yeah, so 6 and 7 are really powerful agents, and they're helping us grow up. How about 8 and 9? Because those are the final grow up steps as far as I'm concerned. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 help us grow up. All right, everyone. That concludes part 1. Episode 50 is next week, and stay tuned. God bless. And Harry, take us out, would you?